Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is, I have an unusual job. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. I have an unusual job. It's nothing vulgar or untoward. It's not illegal or harmful in any way. It's just a little strange. Well, extremely strange after last night. Like any millennial with a liberal arts degree, I've struggled to find jobs where I get to use my skills. Sure, when I was a receptionist, I got to use my fake smile and laugh pretty often when paunchy businessmen made passes at me. But that's not really a challenge. I live for a challenge, which is why I took the job I have now, or at least used to have. After what happened last night, I'm thinking of putting in my 2 weeks. I'm a professional mourner, an actress hired by people to come to funerals and wakes and other memorial ceremonies and pose as a distraught friend or family member. Professional mourning has a surprisingly long history. You can see it referenced in the Bible even. The way that we do it is relatively new. Because our job is to blend in discreetly, I can't tell you the name of the company. They make all the actors sign NDAs about certain things. Just posting this here is a major risk. But quite frankly, I wouldn't be upset about getting fired. We have a website that's only accessible if you have the correct password, and the passwords change often. Our clients are usually not regulars, so we rarely get anybody in a tizzy about the inconvenience. On the site, you can see pictures, ages, and backgrounds of all the actors. For example, if you're looking for an older Middle Eastern woman to participate in a Muslim funeral and pose as the deceased sister from Saudi Arabia, you could scroll through until you found someone you thought was suitable. We get hired based on a myriad of factors. How old we are, how much we resemble the deceased family, how well we blend in with the community, and our culture and religious knowledge. Users on the site can read through our biographies, as well as the anonymous reviews left by other clients to decide if we're a good fit. The selection process is meticulous but quick. Most of the time, I'm hired along with 4 or 5 other pale blonde actors of various genders because we resemble each other and could pass as family. Our clients tend to be the well-off types with money to spare, but very few genuine friends or connections to call on. It's a little pathetic, but it pays my bills. Speaking of which, I've been a little hard up for cash lately. What with the state of the world right now, there have been plenty of funerals, but people are intentionally keeping the crowds pretty small. I was pleased to get the following email promising to ease my current financial burden significantly. Good afternoon, so-and-so. We have received a request from a client for one single mourner to attend the wake of Mr. Doe. You must be in attendance at the event from 6 p.m. Friday until 6 a.m. Saturday. The rate of this job is $10,000, paid in full after service has been rendered. You have been specifically selected for this service. Please observe the following requirements. 1. Wear a modest black dress covering you from wrists to ankles. 2. Wear a black veil to cover your face and hair. 3. Bring a rosary with which to pray. Please, be punctual. I mean, come on, easy money, right? 10 grand for 12 hours of work seemed like a no-brainer. Sure, it was a bit weird for the wake to be an overnighter, but stranger things have happened. I arrived at exactly 6 p.m. and was ushered into the chapel by a lugubrious-looking man who was almost a caricature of an undertaker. I was alone inside the cavernous chapel, except, of course, for Mr. Doe. His casket was clearly expensive, made of cherry wood and intricately carved. He was a wizened thing, lying on white silk, hands folded over his chest, rosary neatly wrapped around them. He just looked like any really old man. Honestly, it's not surprising that funerals for the very old are poorly attended. Most of their loved ones have gone on before them. It was strange that I was the only mourner there, and I was being paid to attend. Gazing through my veil, I noticed an envelope on one of the pews. It was a cream envelope, heavy stock, obviously good stationery. It was sealed with black wax and adorned with a green ribbon. I untied the ribbon and broke the seal, reading the letter to myself. Dear so-and-so, first and foremost, thank you for being here. Mr. Doe's family have chosen not to attend, but to send a proxy in their stead. That proxy is you. During your time here tonight, we have a few simple rules we asked you to abide by. 1. Please light all 12 candles around the casket at sunset and keep them lit all night. Under no circumstances should a candle be allowed to burn out. 2. Please do not speak to anyone after sunset or before sunrise. 3. Please pray the rosary every hour, on the hour. 4. Do not remove your veil for any reason. Upon the completion of your duties tonight, you will be given $10,000 in cash as payment. Usually the families who hired us gave us contact information, but this time there was nothing. It was just me and Mr. Doe for the night. I noticed the sun dipping low and went to light the candles. They were the kind you find at the bottom shelf of the Mexican grocery store. Tall candles in glass jars with saints and prayers embolized on them. I lit each one with the matches provided as the last rays of light faded from the sky. It was 7 p.m. Time to pray. I made it through 3 decades of the rosary before I heard the sound of fabric rustling. I snapped my head up and took a quick survey of the room. I'd never been hired to sit vigil alone, much less for 12 hours through the night. It had only just occurred to me that something could have been amiss with this assignment, that maybe this was a setup for something much worse. I've been joined by another woman. She knelt in front of the casket in a long white gown, a white veil concealing her face, the photo negative of my outfit. She whispered what I assumed were prayers, but it seemed as though her voice came only from her throat. It was an odd, constricting sound, a cross between a gurgle and a hum, but rhythmic and quiet. I watched her up at the casket, the candles haloing her in eerie flickering light. I slid my rosary beads between my fingers, half praying the rest of it, while eyeing the woman in white. When the clock in the hallway struck 8, she stood up and moved to a straight-back chair across the room and sat facing me. I could see nothing of her face, since it was covered by the veil, but the long, slender hands were clearly visible. Like pure white spiders, they crept over the woman's lap, tugging at the fabric of her skin in bizarre skittering movements, as though she was trying to tear the fabric in half. I almost went to speak with her before remembering my instructions. Please do not speak to anyone after sunset or before sunrise. Who the hell was this woman? And why was she staring at me Why was this one of my instructions in the first place? I hadn't thought much of what I'd been given, mostly because I hadn't been given much. But the more I thought about it, the stranger the instructions seemed to me. I breathed deeply in an effort to calm down and focus, and tried to block out the woman's bizarre muttering. The clock rang out once more, and I needed to pray the rosary again. So I returned my gaze to my lap. My heart fluttered in my chest like a frantic bird. My half-assed prayers mingled with the woman in white's muttering in a strange hiss. Eventually, the repetition of the prayers helped me tune her out, and I prayed several rosaries over the course of an hour, simply so I would have something to do. The praying lulled me into a stupor, and I must have dozed off because I awoke to the clock striking midnight. The woman was gone. No muttering, mumbling, gibbering, no swishing of fabric, no rattling of beads. Dead silence. The candles were burning low around the casket, and I continued to make sure that all 12 were lit. They were, and I exhaled a breath I hadn't been aware I was holding. I felt like I could finally relax slightly since the weird lady in white was gone. I felt a little guilty for having fallen asleep, but my only companion was dead, and I figured he probably wouldn't mind. I walked the length of the chapel a couple of times just for something to do, my footsteps the only sound in the entire place. I took another lap around the casket to check on Mr. Doe, and I guess the rustling of my skirt must have caused one of the candles to burn out, because when I stepped back, only 11 were still lit. I went to the back of the chapel to get the matches, and when I turned to walk back up the center aisle, my blood froze within me. All of the candles were out. Mr. Doe was no longer in the casket. This was simply not possible. A cold wave of terror washed over me as I stood trying to comprehend what I was seeing. Empty casket, dark chapel, woman in white. She was back, standing at the lectern, looking as though she was about to address the whole church. She lifted her veil back, and even in the near total darkness of the chapel, I could see a bone-white face with deep black eye sockets. Where the mouth should have been, stretched mottled white skin. Her long fingers were gripping the edge of the lectern fiercely. She raised one hand and pointed straight at me, a horrific guttural sound rising from her throat. I was rooted to the spot, willing my legs to move, but they would not cooperate, not until I heard the ragged breath behind me. Despite my fear, I turned around and saw Mr. Doe standing behind me, milky white eyes staring through me. He groaned from his throat, his jaw being wired shut from the embalming. The woman in white was now perched on the lectern like a gargoyle, staring at me and the corpse behind me. I sprinted across one of the pews, and Mr. Doe followed with heavy, thudding steps. The woman in white skittered down from the lectern on all fours and climbed over several rows of benches. My veil impaired my vision, and without thinking, I whipped it off. I immediately regretted that decision. Without the barrier of black lace between my eyes and the horrors I was seeing, I could no longer deny the experience I was having. Mr. Doe was a few feet behind me, but the woman was getting far too close for comfort. She stared up at me with those black sockets, half curious, half seething with malice. Mr. Doe dumbly crashed through the rows. I dashed madly to the door and out into the lobby, knocking the basin of holy water by the door down on my way. Mr. Doe and the woman stopped short at the small puddle of water, and I took my opportunity to get out of there. I was in my car, hurtling towards home, before I could even comprehend what was happening. I steadied my breathing as I pulled in my driveway and slumped over the wheel once I parked. I was finally safe, or so I thought. As I unlocked the door with my shaky hands, I heard something rattle in my pocket. The box of matches, I don't know what to do with them, but I have a feeling that I shouldn't have taken them, even on accident. Today, I got an email from the same address. Dear so-and-so, we regret that you were unable to complete your duties last night. We will not be able to pay you for the services rendered. Please be advised that in agreeing to our offer, you accepted all responsibilities for injuries, damages, or debts incurred by breaking our guidelines and not completing your duties. I've been sitting in bed typing up this story. I'm not sure if it's my nerves or what, but I can hear a skittering sound outside. I think it's just leaves on pavement, but why can I hear them against the second floor window?